Hi guys, it's Tammy and it's time for July's hydrangeas. So we're gonna go ahead and get started in just a minute. Remember, you always can catch these on replay, and I actually really kind of suggest you watch it first and then go back and replay and paint along. I think it helps a lot. Plus, as I'm getting ready to do this tonight, one thing really kind of just wasn't setting well with me, and that's when I did our background color, I did it in buttermilk and white, and as I look at it next to the flowers, it just seems a little too, I'm going to use the word yellow. And I'm still going to show you that color combination, but I'm going to start off by showing you the background same way, but just with a little grayer tones, and I think that might be a better option for the colors that I chose. And I did choose to show you, I'm going to do this the right way, a blue one. Those are the blues, and there's two blue hydrangeas, and then the white hydrangeas. And for me, for what the ones we have, our white hydrangeas are actually whitish greenish, so they start off green and get whiter. And then using a color, a photograph that I had, I kind of used the pink combination as well. Let's see what I can do here to find us on our page, which would be awesome. Seem to have lots of chaos going on at my house upstairs. I apologize if you can hear that. Not seeing us yet. We will appear though, I'm sure. Okay, but if you do pop on, just do me a favor and say hi, just so that sometimes will trigger it coming up. And Facebook, being what Facebook is right now, is not giving me my little normal option, which is to say find videos, and it usually just pops right up. But we're gonna have to trust that we are here. Okay, so I'm gonna put you down, and I want to show you first. Like I said, I wanted to try do it this way first. I'm gonna fix us. Oops. Upside down this way. Okay. Here's my little cheat to make sure I'm right. If I set this down, it should say blessed. Yes, great, awesome. I'm just going to show you a different color variation first. This is just a clipboard. I posted the other day, don't discount inexpensive surfaces. They can be really a lot of fun and a great way to practice things. This is going to be a paid online class in August. It'll happen right before our sunflower class in August. That's going to be a field of sunflowers. So, and I will offer that to you to take for free as well. So watch out for all that. All right, I used buttermilk, white, and raw umber on the background when I did our sample. And this one, I just want to do a little more gray. I'm still gonna have some brown in it. This happens to be light French blue. You can even just make your own gray with white and black. This has a tiny touch of blue in it, but not really a ton. Still gonna have some black and white available. So that's the color I said I'm going to use for my base coat. But just to show you, I'm just picking up a little flat brush here. Where are all my, oh, they're right there. So if I would pull a little white to a little black, I can play with those two colors until I come up with a gray. And if we look at the comparison, they're pretty close. It's just that one has a touch, I'm going to say a touch of blue in it, but it's really just a very, very little bit. So to do the background, I would have as large of a brush as I need. If I was doing the canvas, I probably would just pick up a chip brush. This will be fine for this. So I'm picking up my paint. Oh, if you're worried about having a straight line for your table, you can always put a piece of painter's tape down. And that way you don't have to worry about that straight line. And then I'm just going to take and paint all of this a medium gray color. I'm doing the back of a clipboard, so even when you put your paperwork on the front, you still have something pretty. I did a bunch of these years ago for teacher gifts for when Ryan was still attending school at Laremont School here in Illinois, which is a school for special needs. And then right before Matthias Academy opened, which is a day program for adults with special needs, I painted a whole bunch of clipboards that the staff use day to day. Okay. The clipboard, this one I actually got at Dollar Tree, is kind of just a real inexpensive chipboard. So it does like to soak up paint. So you have to make sure you have ample paint and actually ample water in your brush too. Not true of canvas. This would not be popping through, the color popping through as much on canvas as it is on this little piece, but it's okay. I'm just doing this to show you. Okay. If that would be too dark of a gray, you could easily just slap some white into it to lighten parts of it up. Remember, I want that background. The idea of this background is to kind of look a bit like wood or weathered wood. So having a little variation in that the background color is good. And once you get it to the level you like, I think that's pretty good actually. This won't be large enough for me to do all three of the jars, so I might just show you one of the jars. So I've lightened my colors up a little bit behind. Then to kind of give that faux wood background look, you can do one of two ways. You could just take a liner around and just kind of draw lines, or you can come in with a big flat brush and just pick up a little bit of your dark color, whatever that may be. And I'm going to show you how if you push it down in the same spot on your plate, it helps blend that color out. I'm still going to use the chisel of my brush as I kind of like skip across to create my lines first. And then I'm going to go right at my line and use the flat part of the brush and just kind of pull some of that color down. And if I start to lose it, I just dipped it into water because I still know I have paint on there. Okay, so that kind of gives me my lines across. If I've got any that are too dark, I just dip my brush in water and I'm just going to touch back over, soften those up a little bit. And you could leave it just like that. Or if you want to have the planks showing through there, you would just do that offset. By that I mean, so I've just picked up a little bit of the black again on my brush, tiny bit. So if I go here and here, the next row I'm just going to be almost like a brick. I'm just rinsing my brush out. And I'm just going to softly go back over those lines so they don't look quite so harsh. Another thing you can do, don't have to, but you could take a liner brush or a round brush and just the very tip of it and add a couple We'll call them nail marks. They're not perfect dots. They're just a little bit of a addition. I'm going to pull this line up and see how nice and crisp that is. Let this dry just a touch, and I can actually move that tape and put it up here to keep my bottom edge nice and straight too. And where I used brown before on this, I probably would go just a darker gray, or even maybe mix a little of the brown and brown, white, and black. Oops, mix them all together. And this would be my darker table color. Did I pick up raw umber? Yeah, raw umber with a touch of black and a touch of white. And again, it doesn't have to be a solid single color. It can have a little bit of those colors mixed as you go back and forth. Now, I know this is not the main purpose of this lesson. Our lesson is to talk about the hydrangeas, but I just wanted to see if I liked this better for my background, which I'm pretty sure I do. But because I have all those colors in my brush, see, it's not a solid blah anything. It's still got some little bit of interest. I'm going to carefully take this tape off. And that way we have our, we're just going to call it faux wood wall, and we have our table. Okay. So you're going to want that to be dry before we go to put any patterns on. So we either hit it with a blow dryer, or I showed this to you in a different way. Let me just go ahead and show you what the original color would look like. I got a little gray in here, but that's okay. I'm just going to set this somewhere, how about there, for a moment. And again, like I said, you can just use a piece of tape to make sure you have a nice straight line. I probably went about 2/3. Yeah, probably about 2/3. And this isn't quite long enough, but it'll serve its purpose. And on the sample I did for you, I just squirted buttermilk and white onto the canvas. And I used a big brush. And oops, and I got a little gray in here. That's okay. This is just a mixed media pad. Wasn't sure I needed another, oops, way too much paint. Wasn't sure I needed another canvas with 3 hydrangeas on it. And my goodness, the people in our booth are so into fall already, it's not even funny. It's like, okay, guess we're done painting summer. I'm not done painting summer. I've got some fun summer projects still up my sleeve for my lives. Okay, so you can see this is all pretty wet. That's when it's easiest to blend those background colors. So I've got all that paint in my brush. I've taken some of it off on the paper plate. I'm going to wipe some off on a paper towel. And then I had raw umber as my line colors. Raw umber is just a little darker than burnt umber. Okay, so again, I pick up a little bit on my brush, and I just try to use the chisel edge, the skinny edge, to first kind of just draw or sketch out, hopefully, some pretty straight lines. The other thing I think I overdid on the originals, I think I had too many skinny lines and not enough thick ones. So blending this, oops, and just gonna try to follow my line. Don't want it to be too harsh. And if you want to create more of the planks behind it, clean my brush and then just lightly tap over them to soften them a little bit. We'll let that dry. We'll pull up that tape. And I used the raw umber and a little bit of the white or the buttermilk for my lower section. The darker you want it, the more raw umber you're gonna want in your brush when you're doing this. I'm gonna try to just do a fairly clean line here. This being paper, it's definitely soaking up a fair amount of paint too. I hope you had a chance to take a peek at the how to sketch out a mason jar. It's actually easier just to kind of sketch it out as we go than it is to put a pattern on most of the time. Now, if you're something that just doesn't feel right to you and you really want to apply a pattern, just make sure your background, the two things we're doing right now, are completely dry before you go and transfer your pattern with either graphite paper, chalk, however you like to transfer your patterns. Okay. All right, so we have our base color for our wall and for our table. I'm gonna see if the other board is dry. Pretty much. Just gonna switch for a second. I will show you all three jars on this one, but we're gonna let that dry for just a second. I'm just gonna draw one jar on here, just so you can see how it begins. So I'm just taking a round brush or liner brush, whatever you prefer, and I'm just going to mix a little white and a little black to make a gray, but I need to make it dark enough so I can actually see it on both of these colors, okay? So I'm going to figure my flowers are gonna be more clumpy. So I'm gonna make this, I'm just gonna, first of all, just give myself just a tiny little mark. So that's gonna be the top of my jar, okay? So I'm gonna go a line down. It's gonna be sitting on the table, and it's gonna be like a parenthesis, and then a line down. here's my bottom parenthesis, and here's the top one. Gives me the idea of the beginning of my jar. I know my whole jar top is gonna get covered up, but I'm gonna also show you that I angle up a little bit on each side. Then I'm going to make like almost like a flattened oval. And I'm going to connect those with a couple little lines. And that would be the beginning of my jar. Okay? I know that part's going to get covered up, so I'm not overly worried about it at all, okay? But I have this jar. I'm then going to come in, and this one we're going to hold a couple stems. So we need to make sure we can see the stems, and sometimes with hydrangeas you're getting some stems that are just going to be leaves. So I'm just picking up some Hauser Green Medium, and I'm just kind of thinking that my one flower is going to go this way, one of them is going to go this way, and I think I might have a stem in here that is going to support more of my leaves. Now I'm going to do the same thing with a little bit of the dark Hauser Green. These stems are going to get covered up. But I want to make sure they're in my jar first. Now hydrangea stems are not super fat, but they're not tiny skinny either. Okay. I'm going to take a flat brush, just a small little flat brush, and I'm going to pick up just a little bit of white. And I'm going to take a good amount of it off, and from the edge I'm going to pull some color from each side in toward my jar. Not even so much the water yet, it's just creating a little bit more shape and substance to my jar. Washed most of that off. I'm going to go back and just touch over that a little bit to soften those colors even more. Okay. So there I've got my stems. We would start by thinking if there is going to be any leaves that are going to be falling over the jar. I kind of showed you this in the step-by-step that I posted too, but I kind of came in with the lighter, or the Hauser medium, and I kind of just laid in the idea of where a couple leaves might be falling from the flowers on to the mason jar. Definitely be coming back and adding a lot more color to this. This is just to give me an idea of a couple places my leaves might be. We'll go ahead and have one come off this way too. Maybe let some of your leaves get a little shapely. I'm going to make this one more like the white one, and then we'll go back and we'll add those other colored ones and the other ones. So I'm going to take the light Hauser Green. And this is just that flat brush I was using. And I'm just going to kind of tap a little bit of an idea of where I want. These are not particular shapes at all, or strokes. I am just kind of pouncing in a background color for this one. And then I kind of decided I wanted there to be a second one. So let's make this one a little bigger. We'll let this little one be on top. I've already planned that these are going to be already in the, covering the mouth of the jar, so I might need to make them even a little bigger than I originally planned. That'll be good. Now, this is a really good color to be working with these yellow, green, whitish ones, but I still want to pull just a little bit of darker color. This is Hauser Green Medium. Just tap it here and there before I start playing with my flowers, my flower petals, just so I have some of that dark color that pops from behind. I'll be working on top of it, so I don't have to worry about coming back and shading later. I'll have my shading actually down here already. Okay, so you've seen just a little bit of background color for them. I'm going to switch over to a filbert brush. Did you all get a chance to play with the filbert brushes I sent you? I hope so. I'm reaching for mine because I used them earlier. I'm going to try using this one. Okay. So I'm going to put a little of the Hauser Green Light on my plate. Maybe a clean plate. Got Hauser Green Light, a medium. And I'm going to start with the Hauser Green Light. And I'm just going to start, oh, I can't see that at all. So Hauser Green Light mixed with some white. And I'm just going to start laying down some petal strokes. They can be 3 petals, they can be a single petal, they can be 4. This is going to be just our beginning background. So we're covering a good part of our base coat up with these little petal strokes. You'll see when we go to do ours on the other board that I'll be shading my leaves before I do this, right next to my hydrangea. But just for this one, I'm just trying to get some of the hydrangea in here. I like when those colors blend together and kind of mix and you get different shades. And when they don't show up enough, you know, you need to get more white in this case. I'm going to have to make sure that I can see the differentiation between these 2 flowers. So I'm going to stop with those 2 colors for right now. And I'm going to take a little bit of the dark Hauser Green that I had before. And I'm just going to lay it down to be like shading next to where the front flower is going to be. I know that looks a little weird right now, but why I have that on out, I'm going to go back to a flat brush, a little flat brush. I'm picking up just on the corner, and I'm going to kind of go next to my hydrangeas with that dark color and then kind of decide where a middle line is. And pull from the middle just to create a little darker color right next to my hydrangeas. Same here. Okay, we have the idea of the leaves underneath there. I'm going to finish this one up really quick before we go on to our piece. So I'm still using the same size brush, and I'm still using the Hauser Green Light and White. But as this starts to dry and those colors start to blend together, you kind of lose some of them. So you can come back and add a few more, maybe being a little brighter. Now this is all still being done with the first size brush. I know I'll be coming back and adding some smaller petals with a smaller filbert. Oops, brush go flying. I'm gonna leave most of that dark alone. I'm just gonna put a few next to it so they blend a little bit more. I'm rinsing my brush, and I'm going to grab a smaller filbert. This happens to be a 4 for me. Every brand is a little different. So I put the green and the white in my brush. I'm going to come back and try to add a couple smaller petals here and there. Some might overlap. Might create a couple new ones completely that weren't there at all. I might choose to do just a few smaller petals in our back one as well. Okay, now for the centers, I was looking at ours today, and actually our centers are more brown than they are yellow. But I think for our purpose, using the greens and the yellows are going to be just fine. So I'm just going to use the tip of a small round, or you can use a stylus. I'm going to use some of the medium Hauser Green on some of them. Every once in a while, I'm going to put a little bit of the darker green. And then I'll come back in with a yellow, primary yellow, sunny or lemon yellow. It doesn't matter a whole lot. Just stay away from the gold yellows. So these are more clean yellows. Really there. And some of them can be next to some of the other ones. You can create new ones on their own. How do you feel about sunflowers for August? Let me know when you're actually do have time to pop on and look at this. Sunflowers seem like a good choice. I think I'd hoped to be doing cosmos and using them from my garden that I planted when we first started the group, but so far we have one that has actually bloomed and a couple that are trying to, and tons of stalks. So maybe I'm not a good cosmo grower. Now these very well could be whiter, but I think they look pretty good. I want to kind of consider a light source. So like for us, we know it's shading behind here, so our light's probably more coming this way. This one's shaded. Then I'm going to come back down to our jar for just a little more. I'm going to pick up a little white, really washy, and I'm going to lay a little more of the water in here. I'm not covering everything up completely. And I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of that blue gray that we actually used as part of our background. And then I'm going to think about what colors might be reflecting from the flowers. So maybe a touch of yellow. Maybe a little bit of the green. Again, very little, just a tiny touch. And then just to give it a little more depth down below, I'm going to go back to, remember this was our brown and our black and our white. So I'm going to start with just some brown. This is the raw umber. And I'm going to go underneath. Looks like I need to add a little black to that. Come in with a little straight black just to really outline the edge of my jar here. And right away go in with a little white. And that would be our single version of the hydrangea. Okay. I go ahead and pull the multimedia pad back over here. Move my paints. So we've got 3 jars. They're all done the same way with 2 lines down, and I went ahead and did a basic idea of the top of them, just so I knew where I wanted to put my flowers. So that's what we're going to do for these as well. So I'm going to go in with just a little bit of a gray, even though this is more in the brown tones. To put my jar in, I'm still going to kind of make up a little gray, black and white. And this is going to be my 1 jar up back here. One's going to come down about that far. About that far. Go up a little. So that is the first jar. Then I'm going to do 2 jars over here. I'll do the front one first. And then we know we have another one that's going to be sitting right next to it. These might be a little narrower than the ones I drew, but I know I'm not going to see the tops of my jars, so I'm not overly concerned about that. I'm going to take in a little bit of white. I go into my greens to create a couple stems. I have a little bit of water in my brush. I know I've got a couple stems here. And this one was just pretty much this one main stem, okay? So there's my stems in my jars. And we know that I used a little bit of the light green, which I think I just put on here. I did. Yeah. With the idea that we had one that was here and one that came up a little higher here. Oh, we got to do our leaves too. We'll do those next. Okay. Cease, stop. Okay. My Hauser green medium, I even decide where I think I'm going to have a couple leaves. One's going to come about here. And I think I'll make sure there's a few coming off of here as well. So we'll do one here. These are very sketchily done just to give me a placement and to make sure that I'm covering up the tops of my jars. And they're basically just leaf shapes, so not exact by any means. One of the best ways to work with painting flowers is to just work off of a arrangement. Even if you're taking a picture of that arrangement, you're working from a still life of real flowers, and that is very beneficial. I'm bending down to pick up a brush that I dropped. Before I go any further with my flowers, I'm going to go into the dark Hauser green. And do a little shading next to where the flowers will be. I'll have to come back and do this again. But I pretty much know that my leaves are going to be right next to my flowers near the top of the leaf. And I can go ahead and just kind of start adding a little color. And I'm gonna add a little more green here. Okay, so we just have the idea of our leaves there, and we know we'll be coming back and adding some more, but at least this gives us a little bit of shading underneath the leaf where our petals can cover. Okay, let me get you back. Oop. Okay. All right, so I kind of added a couple leaves, a couple of our light green ones there. I'm going to go ahead and actually add a leaf up here too. All right, so I've laid in my color for my green ones. I'm going to lay in a little bit of blue for my blue ones, and on the one I did for you, there's actually a tiny bit of teal tucked in here or there too. It's just more of an accent color, but it's actually where I'm going to start with just a little bit of the Laguna. So as I'm, creating my shape of my flower, I know they're not going to be all this color, but I'm going to have a little bit of this in here so I can pop through as we come in with the other colors. Okay, so that's kind of the touch of that. Then I did everything with the blue flowers with the primary blue. I just kept making it lighter and lighter as I needed to. So let's think about that for a second. So I can put a little bit of the primary blue, especially right next to where they're going to meet. Might want a touch of it here and there. Then I'm going to start adding white when I'm doing my petals. But I don't have to worry about that quite yet. I'm going to go ahead and do the base color here for my pink one, which was a little dragon fruit, which is a darker shade of pink. I'm guilty of getting obsessed with colors every once in a while. Right now, dragon fruit is definitely one of my obsession colors. So I'm just going to make this a really big bloom that's going to kind of go over some of my white green ones too. All right. So a little different composition, but same idea. So I've got my 6 filbert, and I'm going to mix blue and white to get a lighter blue to start with. It's a pretty decent light blue, maybe a little lighter. Okay, so dirty brush. I'm just going to start laying in some petals for my blue. My paint is not just it's a mess. It's just kind of a blob. So that's all we're really worrying about for right now, is more getting some blobby color down. And extending it out a little further. Now, still the dirty brush, I'm taking a little paint off, but I still have a dirty brush. I'm going to go into my white, and I'm going to start laying a couple more of the same size petal down. But the white is blending with the lighter blue, creating a lighter blue and even a white at times. Knowing I want it to be the lightest on the outer edge over here. let some of that darker blue hang out. I'm going to have to come back with a smaller brush and smaller petals, but we're going to let that just kind of breathe for a minute. Take a quick sip of water. And I'm going to move over to my green. Now, these are a lot smaller than when I originally did your piece. So I'm picking up it with a smaller brush, and I'm picking up some white on my brush. So I have a little white on the tip. And I'm going to start just doing a bunch of these little petals, letting it blend. And the harder I push down on the brush, the bigger the petals will be. So I can even use this little brush to make bigger petals and smaller petals in just a couple minutes when I go to do the smaller ones. I'll let those breathe for a minute. We're just going to blend and settle down. And I'll go in with the dragon fruit and baby pink. Really? Really? So I could just start basically with my baby pink and maybe just a touch of the dragon fruit and I actually have a tiny bit of blue still showing up in my brush, and that's okay because I like when, especially the pinks and blues, have just a touch of another color in them. And you see the pink ones, I have a tiny bit of the blue that pops through here and there. Okay. So I haven't cleaned my brush yet. I'm just going to go into white and do some lighter petals of the same size here. And to give a little green, but that too is okay. All right, so we've got our main petals in all the colors. I'm gonna come in right now with just a little bit of white. Take a lot of it off of my plate, and I'm going to lightly go across my vases where there should be some water in them. This first application is probably going to fade into almost nothing, but that's okay. I'm going to go with my smaller brush back to my blue flowers. And I'm not covering the whole area. I'm just doing a few of the smaller petals. So here's that light blue I made, and I'm going into the white. And I just want to make a couple little smaller clusters. They might even be more white than blue at this point. And again, I want to emphasize that this is the edge of the one that's in front. And just like we did when I showed it to you on this guy, adding that variety of colors in the centers just gives you some different interest and gives your eye different places to wander to. So we'll do the same thing using a little bit of, and we could even use, you know, on the blue one, we could even go and do a couple that have a couple dark centers, dark blue centers. I did that on what I was doing on our live today on our business page, and I actually really liked them with a little bit of a blue center here and there. Before we're done, I'll stand up and grab the piece. It's actually coming along quite nicely. Oops. And then we can switch to a green if we want. This is that light Hauser green, which barely shows up on these guys, so might not be worth my while. Then I'm gonna pick up the yellow. This was sun yellow. You could use cadmium primary. Just stick with more of a clean yellow. Now beware, because we're putting a lot of paint on these, you gotta be careful not to put your hand in it so you don't smear it everywhere. Lift that a little closer to you. Okay. We already did the smaller petals on the white hydrangeas, so I'm just going to give a couple centers. We'll define these two a little more when we shade at the very end. Both there. And then in the pinks, we haven't come back and done the smaller brush yet. So we need to do that first. Just a couple little smaller ones. If you like that little bit of blue in there, this would be a good time to just pick up a tiny bit of that light blue you made. And it's not even full. Ooh, that's way too dark. That was a lot of white. And you can just add a touch of it here and there. And then we will come back with a little green and a little yellow for centers. Dark greens. And a few yellows. And when I'm doing the next color, sometimes it's a new center, sometimes it's highlighting the one before it. And you can even come back with some straight white here and there in your centers to help them pop a little more in any of the colors. And keep going. And okay, where are we at? There we are. A couple more white ones. All right. With your leaves, you're going to add as much as you want, but really the main detailing on the leaves is using your liner brush or a small round and shakily giving it a center vein and then doing veins off of that. And if you have a spot where you're not seeing the dark, just go to the next color, the medium, just so you have a variation in shades within your leaf. All right. So I want to come back into our water, and again, just picking up either a flat or a little bit of your filbert brush and a little more of the white. It's very little. I want to like really define where the top of the water is. I want to pick up a tiny bit of colors from the flowers themselves, so maybe just a touch of yellow, because we have yellow in all of our centers. Maybe pick up a little tiny bit of the blue. And you can even pick up a little pink, because that's going to reflect too. Okay. Coming back with your liner brush, look to see where you might need to define your jars a little bit. Maybe it's just on the edges. Then I took a little bit of the brown and black. Oops. It's kind of washy. But a little color underneath them. The last thing I did on the sample I showed you guys is, you see the soft float that's all the way around almost everything? I'm going to do that with brown and a large flat brush. As I look at the one I did in the grays, I don't feel it's quite as necessary, maybe because there's a little more of a contrast between that green-white hydrangea and the background. And maybe for me, for my eye, it's just that gray is a little softer than the off-white is. But I'm going to show you how I do it. And you decide if you want to or not. I don't know that I need a 3/4 inch brush. This is a 12. And I'm just going to pick up a corner. I'm going to find a place where I can really push down and make that color soften. I'm going to put the darkest part of that color next to my flowers. And I'm going to be very sketchy. So I'm just barely touching the paper as I'm going around. Keeping the dark color next to my flower. And leaves. Even next to my jar. I do apologize for the extra noise that is showing up more and more upstairs. Oops, I went right into my green. Bad plan, bad plan. Okay, I'll let that dry just a touch more. We'll go over to the other side. I'll do over by my pinks, same thing. Next to my leaf. Okay, 1 second, please. Oh my goodness. Need to. Sorry, I had to send a little note upstairs. Things are really loud on my end, and do make sure your flowers are all dry before you do this. I'm doing it to show you, but I would certainly benefit from having everything completely dry first. What I really want to show you is on the green one especially, that I'm going to go around on the pink, but I'm also going to go around so it looks like this guy's in front. Because my colors are still a little wet, I'm having a little problem with that. I'll go ahead and go around this one. And the blue shows up pretty well, but we can still add a little bit of that brown to help separate those two as well. All right, I'm going to grab something just awful quick for you guys. Show you. Be right back. So this is the blue hydrangeas I did on the tray earlier today. And again, I did that shading around them. And it just really helps, one, soften them, and also helps make them stand out a little bit. All right. So there we have our hydrangeas for today, for July. Again, here is the finished piece I did for you guys with the blue, the white, and the pink hydrangea. And then we showed you just the single one with a grayer background. So either way, and you know, it really doesn't matter, it's more of a preference. And then again, we've kind of stuck with the original color plan when I painted it along with you tonight. All right, so love to see them. Please show me what you do. Even if you're just playing with the petals, go ahead and show us how they're progressing for you and where you're having trouble, so I can try to help you so it can be something you can grow from. And then next week we will do a Q&A. I pop on. If anyone pops on, great. If not, we just, I'm here for a few minutes. If you guys are here and have questions, I can certainly answer more of them. So that's all I've got for you tonight. And I hope you're having a wonderful Thursday evening. And until we talk again, take care. Bye-bye.